everyone, and welcome to The Hash, your daily beat on crypto and culture. My name is Naomi Brockwell, and I'm delighted to be joined by other wonderful co-hosts. We have Ben Powers, Jen Sanasie, Zack, Seward, and Nate. You are joining us today. I actually still can't see anyone on the screen, so I'm going to refresh my page. But Jen, I'm going to hand this over to you while I do that, because we've got exciting Beeple news coming up, and huge headlines. All the mainstream media is covering it. So take us away.
All right, Naomi's going to refresh. And in the meantime, Beeple is making bank and waves in the digital art world. Every day, the first 5,000 days has sold for, I cannot believe it, $69 million. That's including fees through Christie's auction house. Now, this was the first purely digital artwork to be auctioned by a major auction house. And now Beeple is among the top 3 valuable living artists. This is crazy, and I love it. I know you all have thoughts and views on this. I can tell by the smiles on everyone's faces. Ben, let's kick it off with you. What did you think when you saw this headline this morning?
All right. I said, yesterday was it or whatnot? Nope, previous day. But I'm interested in NFTs again, and this is exciting. This is really interesting. The last final bids in the final minutes were shooting the price of, I believe, is 24 million just a few minutes prior to the close, and then it rocketed up to 69. So this is really fascinating to see. I know the New York Times it feels like derisively referred to it as a JPEG image sold during NFT mania, but I think that that shows a real value here. I wouldn't value this thing at 69 million, but somebody does, and that speaks volumes to the staying power of this. Another little curious detail I thought, just sort of being on social media and seeing all this go down, is that people are seemingly just now maybe looking at the actual images in this collage. And so we're getting, a deep review on some of those things, and people are reacting just sort of saying, what? But hey, it's sold, and it is, right up there with some of the most valuable artwork in the world, I believe.
Yeah, the images are collage of all of Beeple's artwork. I don't know. I think was it last year? Zack, I know you've been following the story. Was it all his pieces from last year?
What? You talking about the 6.6 million, that paltry 6.6 million that he brought in? I think that was last month on Nifty Gateway. That's nothing, man. He 10x'd it in the matter of a month. It's pretty crazy. Yeah, this is crazy. We have Beeple on the show. Beeple is on CDTV like tomorrow, CoinDesk TV, 9 a.m. We're going to have Beeple. So you guys should tune in. Look at that. See that guy? That's the guy right there. So we're going to talk to him and be like, yo, what's it feel like?
One thing I will add, cool. Ben, is that you're talking about you don't understand why someone would buy this, but honestly, I feel that way about so much expensive art. You go to Paris, the Louvre is wonderful, and then you go to Centre Pompidou, and there's just pink screen. 1980, and you're like, well, it's just a pink screen. I could have done this. I'm not the best connoisseur in the art world, but I look at some of these things. I remember this thing that was popsicle sticks with playing cards glued to it, and I'm like, okay, that's cool, but they're also valuing it at millions and millions and millions of dollars. I think that at the end of the day, art is subjective. People are going to find value in all kinds of different things. I'm not going to judge them. You guys do you, So it is fascinating to see that someone would pay $69 million. But I wouldn't. But yeah, yay to the art world.
No, I thought it was interesting. Me and Jen were chatting before the show, and I was like, I immediately want to hear from the buyer about how this makes them feel, because I want to hear those subjective feelings that are elicited from this art that would go for this price tag. It's fascinating. Yeah. So if you're out there, DMs are open, let me know. But that being said, too, I think this also goes and points to NFTs as a store of value in an interesting way. We see that playing out in the luxury art world all the time. And I'm wondering if, we talk about NFTs as sort of opposing digitally, and I wonder if we might be moving away from that and into them as their own sort of asset class akin to physical art. I don't know, Nate, what are your thoughts there as the resident economist for the next few days?
Like any kind of asset class that has a lot of money going towards it, you can see a lot of creativity come out of having just that much capital around. But one of the things that I think might be interesting is that I know when talking to my friends who are art curators, that there's often individual artists have to think about what selling really high, like early in their career, might do to the rest of their career. Sometimes they try to avoid kind of selling pieces at a really high price in auction. So if NFTs begins to transform basically how much artists sell for, can artists in their 20s, 30s begin to just keep making like millions without it having a negative effect on their careers? Like, it might change that kind of trajectory from, an art piece going from, gallery to museum, but then in this case, digital gallery to digital museum.
Yeah, I think that the regulatory environment around this. Sorry, go ahead, Zach.
You do it, Naomi. Can you see us?
Right.
First of all, can you see?
I can see you. It's great. Yes. I love you guys.
All right. Amazing.
So talking about the regulatory environment around this, so it's super interesting because traditionally, there are tremendously powerful lobbyists in the art world who make sure that, if you keep your art in a warehouse, don't take it out, you don't have to pay export taxes and all that sort of thing. Now we're dealing with digital art. So how, the art world is notorious for being a world for money laundering, right? And so now we've got this digital art world. There's no KYC required on any of these sites. I think that's great. I like the freedom of that, but it also does open up the gateway to all of this stuff transferring over into the NFT world. So we're going to have to see how that works. We're going to have to see whether, there's going to be like capital gains and all of these things on NFTs. We're going to have to see, I wouldn't be surprised if the whole NFT world becomes KYC after a while. But as I said, super powerful lobbyists in the traditional art world that have kept it a relatively free area from a lot of this stuff. And so whether that transfers over to the digital world, we'll have to see. Zach, what were you going to say?
I saw that there were some stipulations for if this was to be paid in crypto, and that's not known yet. So as of press time, we don't know if this was bought with Ether or with your fiat currency of choice. So I think that's going to be really interesting to know. Bloomberg reported after speaking with the guy running the auction yesterday that he's pretty sure that it's going to be in ETH, but we just don't know if that's the case. So some of the stipulations in the fine print are that this wallet has to be administered through a qualified custodian. So we're talking about, the Coinbases of the world, the Paxos of the world. I think it was Gemini was listed as one of the options. So I think, they too are, Fidelity Digital Assets is one of the ones that is also listed there. So they too are thinking about some of these money laundering ramifications that certainly is a topic of conversation on crypto Twitter these days. But it's super interesting. I do want to, I can't wait to see who comes out and, proves their ownership of this thing. And, maybe there's some novel financialization that they can do on it, fractional ownership or tokenization that can make this thing make sense. But going to be exciting either way.
You're the
All
owner
right, I'm
of
wrapping it.
Contact Ben.
I'm wrapping this thing. I just got word from the control room that we're wrapping it, and I'm going next. Sorry, so I was talking. So we're gonna change gears here. We're gonna talk to Bitcoin. We're gonna talk about Bitcoin company Backed finally winning a New York Bit license. Goes to show you what I knew. I mean, I thought they had this thing already, but I was just talking to a colleague, and they only had a New York Trust license to date. The interesting thing here is that they can serve New York customers more fully, but it comes ahead of a public listing that they are pursuing by way of the SPAC, which is the word of the year in tech circles. So this too, as Coinbase prepares to go public, Backed too will be among these publicly traded crypto giants. I feel like Backed has been kind of quiet. Like I feel like Backed is sort of lurking, like in the background a little bit. And I know Nate, you've done some strong reporting on Backed in the past. What's your take on how the Bit license, which is still a pretty rare and coveted license in the crypto world? What's your take on where this licensing will take Backed?
Well, it's interesting. I know that maybe the Bit license might help them in terms of not having to get like a money transmitter license in every single state, especially if they're wanting to do what they had talked about in the past with like partnerships with Starbucks. Being able, I want to go to Starbucks in New York and go and buy my coffee with Bitcoin, and so that's pretty interesting. It's interesting that they moved from a trust to a bit license. I think it has to do with like the money transmitter license. I think they're like number 25 or number 26 that have been able to make that that high standard. So props to them.
Yeah, I mean, they had like all these plans and then COVID hit. Like they were going to be like your digital wallet where you could like store various digital assets, including like airline miles and like, you know, Starbucks points and like all this stuff. And then, you know, big curveball was thrown in the way of those plans last March, obviously. And I feel like they're kind of waiting for their moment. And I think the public listing will bring renewed interest in this company. But yeah, I don't know. Does anyone have any feelings about where Back sits in the current environment? Ben, I know you've been looking at them a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, no, I think it's really interesting. This bit license is correct me if I'm thinking about this incorrectly. You know, it's kind of notoriously difficult. Like it's a pretty extensive vetting process. They aren't widely given out. Yeah. Okay. And so this feels like a pretty high bar to achieve. You know, in some ways, it feels like a little bit of a dry run for that IPO or that public listing, and seeing it. So, you know, if they're operating here, they're going to be kind of on the same footing as some other, you know, large players in the area. And I think that, you know, the Bitcoin royalty rewards as part of that card, is that a thing that they were working on? Could be really interesting as they try and maybe no.
I feel like that was. I feel like that was BlockFi, but it could be backed. I'm not sure. We'll have to call up Army of fact checkers
just
on
like
that one.
Record scratch.
Got it from the record. All right, cool.
Exactly. No, so I think it'll be interesting to see how they play. But that's kind of what my takeaway was. Like, kudos on them for getting this license. They don't hand them out easily, and you know, it'll be interesting to see where they go from here.
Yeah, I'm going to add to that when you talk about the bit license. I would call the bit license the height of corruption in New York City. The architect was Ben Lawsky. During the hearings, I was there when they were discussing all of this, and he just shut down every single person in the industry who was saying this is a terrible idea and it's going to lead to a mass exodus in New York. And it did. It led to a mass exodus and everyone left. And so it was, you know, and then Ben Lawsky, after he set this notoriously difficult thing to achieve up, then he leaves and uses the revolving door of private sector and government to then join the board of Ripple, and then they got awarded a bit license. So, I mean, this whole thing just completely stinks of corruption to me. I think it's a total racket. And, you know, it's great that they have it. I would have presumed that they would get it a lot earlier, honestly, because I thought Bax had it in the bag because of their strong ties to the New York Stock Exchange and all of that. I thought that they were set up to be the go-to. So it actually did disprove some of my theories in a way, because I was like, whoa, I thought that they would have been able to grease enough palms to get there, but they got there in the end. And a lot of other companies haven't and still are not operating in New York. So we'll see what happens with them. They were also poised to be like the first ETF for years, and then they just didn't come through with it because everything just kept getting shut down. So, I mean, the government, especially New York government, makes it really difficult for companies to get these things through. So we'll see that sounds cool, having a wallet where you could store all these digital assets. I like the idea of that. So we'll see if they can get that going now that they have some of the appropriate licenses to go with it.
Yep, and some of the additional capitalization, you know, famously Backed was spun up by Intercontinental Exchange, which is the parent company of the New York Stock Exchange. It was briefly run by Kelly Loeffler, who went to serve in the Senate for a minute before, I think, being voted out of office late last year. I think that's right. Ben, correct me on that one, please. Thank you. Okay,
definitely.
Fantastic. I'm just running the fact check here on the back story.
Exactly. So this is journalism real time.
This is real-time journalism, guys. So, yeah, I'm pretty excited to see if this public listing sort of vaults them back into a pole position in the crypto market, right? They have a bit license. They obviously have significant backing from some of the biggest players in New York, and seeing what they'll do after they hit the public markets, I think it's going to be interesting. Nate, you have any final thoughts on this before we change gears?
No, I think it's interesting. I'm surprised. I agree with you, Naomi, that they didn't get this sooner, considering their connections to ICE and the New York Stock Exchange.
Yeah.
Would have thought they would have been a shoo-in.
Kelly Loeffler was married to the guy who ran the New York Stock Exchange. You'd think that they would have had connections, but.
Well, let's take a break. After the break, we're going to talk to Ben about his adventures in app stores seeking out scam crypto apps. And I'm excited to talk to him about that. So stick with us. It's The Hash. We'll see you soon.
All right, and we're back with The Hash. And today I brought a story to the table that my colleague and I, Colin Harper, wrote, where we went diving into the murky and polluted waters of scam crypto apps on the Apple and Google Play Store. Now, essentially, we kind of wanted to get run of the lay of the land here. People were kind of pinging us saying, hey, this app is a scam. Hey, this is like my coins are locked in this. And we went through and we identified a lot of apps that were either stealing users' keys, kind of locking up their coins. One in particular we looked at in the App Store was Trezor, which is a hardware wallet that does not have an app. But this app was basically taking users' keys and seed phrases and sending them to a website that we hunted down that was imitating another hardware wallet. And we got that site shut down. So, we reported these to the relevant authorities and, took some scammers to task for it. But at the same time, we found a lot more, some of which have been shut down, some of which were still active, in fact. So I can dive into this further, but I'm curious to hear, Zach, you want to talk to me about it? What's your questions?
Zach, before you jump in, I just want to say, Ben, well done. That's
You're
awesome.
Scam Batman.
Hats off to you. Yeah, you're fighting justice, vigilante in the streets. I love that. Sorry, Zach,
Privacy,
take it away.
security, and scams. Those are my things.
That's the impact tag. That's impact, man.
Yeah.
You're really out here making positive change in the world and keeping people's finances safe. So first of all, hat tip to you, sir. Second of all, I'm glad that you made it out okay. It sounds pretty dicey. Talk to me about the volume. You mentioned there was quite a bit of this stuff out there. Quantify for me the scope of this problem. Like how many scammy crypto apps are out there seeking to steal your coins?
It's really hard to tell. and that's part of the problem. It's really a game of whack-a-mole in some ways. So I want to shout out Sean O'Brien at ExpressVPN Security Labs, who helped us do traffic analysis on these apps to see where the data was going. But, the Trezor app that we tracked down and was going to a different hardware wallet scam website is sort of indicative of how this works. These sites will spin up 2 or 3 different apps that are imitating popular brands. And in some cases, they might not make it past the gatekeepers. Apple's a little bit more hardcore in terms of their vetting than Google is in some of these cases. But they'll spin up 3 or 4, and then once one gets shut down, they'll put another one out there. And then once that gets shut down, they'll come up with another one. So it's really just a matter of repackaging and pushing these things. And, to kind of catch the ones that slip through the cracks, Reddit's been really good about this. Communities of users there have taken to listing out the variety of different scam apps that they see and then reporting those and trying to get them taken down. So they've seen everything from not only we covered fake Cardano wallets in this story as well, and some others, those users have seen fake Coinbase apps, fake Polkadot apps. So it's really just sort of a full gamut of stuff that, scammers are capitalizing on. And, we talked to some experts about, sort of as crypto bull runs tend to occur, the volume of these apps tend to increase just as people are trying to cash in, obviously. But, what they were saying is that this is a common sort of behavior for scammers as you capitalize on brand recognition, popularity, and sort of the zeitgeist. And right now, in terms of crypto, that hits all 3 of those areas.
Wow.
Ben, every story you bring to the table is just frightening. These scams sound very sophisticated. And so as you're speaking, I think about the people who maybe see Gene Simmons promoting Cardano, and then they want to get some of their own. They maybe end up entangled in one of these scams. What should people be looking out for to avoid getting caught up in these?
Yeah, it's so tricky. So some of these are sophisticated, some of these are really not. And there's a full variety there. Some these ones that we are able to trace, they're not using VPNs. They're not using any tools for security. They're just kind of relying on people to not be able to do the analysis that we did, which is, okay. So people should always do their research, like check the reviews, check the listings, maybe check and see if the thing that you're trying to get an app for actually has an app. It's usually listed on the actual website of some of these things. But in the case of the Trezor app, for example, they not only linked back to the legitimate Trezor site on the public listing, they also linked back to their privacy policy. So it does get really tricky. It's just a matter of do your research quite often. I spoke to one expert for this piece who sort of helps people, like they hire him when they get scammed to try and recover their funds. And he was saying that, people do less research in crypto than they do for traditional investing. And that kind of blows his mind sometimes, just because the amount of complexity and stuff in that. Zach, jump in here.
I'm going to pipe up for Will Foxley. I'm going to pour one out for Will Foxley, who's not here today. But this to me is very much in keeping with Will's sort of and that's why custodial services are good, right? So these are people who are trying to take crypto custody into their own hands, and they're falling prey to some of these scams. What is when you look at some of the bigger ideas here between... Zach.
Because you've got scam coin-based apps, you've got scam custodial apps as well. True. That's the whole point. So I think that it's that doesn't really save you just by using a custodian. You still have to be real careful.
That's true. That's true.
To me,
sorry.
I was just going to say the bigger sort of the bigger tension here between I guess if I'm seeking the Trezor app, right? I'm clearly interested in self-custody. So the bigger tension here is there's a sort of a self-custodial, I want to be my own bank. That's a core tenet of the crypto world. And then there's oh, this is hard. I need someone to help me do this. Was there any discussion of these big sort of forces at play in the piece?
Yeah, so I think this goes back to something we talk about on the show a lot, which is just sort of be self-aware in some ways, have an accurate reflection of kind of the limits of your knowledge and also what you're comfortable with. Naomi, you and I talk about this in terms of privacy and security. Privacy and security mean different things for people in different situations. So all of this is contextual, and the amount of friction that you want to engage with potentially, or the amount of non-custodial aspects you want to engage with, is you need to be aware of the risks that come with that. One thing I do think that was a larger takeaway from this piece too is that, this was happening on centralized app stores in some ways, right? Part of the reason people go to Google and Apple is for that sort of vetting process. And this shows that that's not always the case. Not everything in there is going to be perfect. So there might be other decentralized alternatives where some of these, sort of straw man arguments that we hold up about them being less safe or things like that get knocked down in some ways. And I will say just a little tidbit from this piece that I loved is that, Apple's introduced these sort of privacy nutrition labels. And for this Trezor app that we saw, the app developers who put it up had posted that this app does not collect your data on that sort of privacy nutrition label. So it shows maybe some of the limits or shortcomings with those labels themselves. But that was one that I just was a little bit of absurdity wrapped into one. But Naomi, take us away to the next segment.
Well, for sure. I was just going to mention on the nutritional labels, it's all self-reported. So be careful there. But next segment, we're talking about BlockFi. Nate, what's going on there?
Right. So BlockFi is wanting to come in and fresh capital that they raised in the Series D. They're valued at about $3 billion by those investors. And they, according to their CEO, Zack, they want to use that to double their staff, fuel the launch of a Bitcoin rewards card, expand in geography. But they also want to launch non-crypto related products because they think that crypto lenders could eventually rival banks as the primary banking relationship for consumers. I know some people live entirely off of Bitcoin, which is not for the faint of heart. But having a BlockFi bank account seems like it would be easier. So curious to know from you guys, what do you think it would take for you to switch from your JP Morgan Chase, your B of A, to something like a BlockFi or a regular bank account?
It's a great question.
That's a good question.
You got me thinking now.
All of us are what would it take?
Well, I mean, I know a lot of people who just shut down their bank accounts entirely. They're not going to have a BlockFi. They're not going to have a Chase. They're just going to have their money in their wallet, which is the sort of the ethos of why Bitcoin started, right? Be your own bank. Now, a lot of people have transformed that over the years and said, be your own bank means buy your crypto and make your purchases with Visa, but also store money. And that's called being your own bank, or you're in control of the money you store. And, back in the early days, that wasn't it. The idea was, let's create a system that replaces the system. Let's not have to use a bank account. Let's not have to use a Visa card when we make purchases. Let's only use crypto and not empower this system that isn't in our best interest. So I'm not sure that a lot of people who are entirely taking that, financial sovereignty to heart are going to go for necessarily a BlockFi account. They're probably just going to say, no, my treasure's pretty good, providing that it's not the scam one on Ben's website that he mentioned. But right. I think that there are many people, maybe as an interim step, who might want to look into this sort of stuff. I mean, you're looking at places in Wyoming, you've got all these awesome special purpose depository institutes being set up where they are like crypto banks. It kind of does seem like this interesting hybrid where they're custodial, but they have a better ethos than traditional banks supposedly do. So we'll have to see how that works. And obviously there's going to be a gamut of people and a spectrum, and where people fall in that spectrum is going to be up to like individual choice essentially and what they value. Zach?
Yeah, we talked about this with Coinbase a little bit, and I think the elephant in the room for a company like BlockFi is really the world of DeFi, right? Where you can do some of these functions without having to deal with the intermediary at all. It's a little bit trickier in the Bitcoin world, as opposed to assets on Ethereum and other smart contract networks. But I think there's going to be these big custodial giants in crypto, Coinbase, BlockFi among them, maybe Bakkt, we were talking about them earlier, where you can get yield on your Bitcoin by parking it with these sort of new type of banks. And I think that's going to be attractive to a lot of people going forward. And I think just reading this story that you did, Nate, like just understanding the scope of their ambitions is pretty striking. We think of them as a crypto lender, but they're starting to think of themselves as a true, financial services provider that can bridge the world of crypto and fiat. And all of a sudden they have a bunch of capital to try to make that happen, and also potentially a public listing in the coming months. So Ben, what do you got?
Yeah, no, that's kind of just what I was thinking, Zach. It's looking at like how are they going to appeal to consumers, right? Like what perks are they going to give us to have us leave like the existing financial institutions, and really like trying to go toe to toe with like, the JP Morgans of the world or something like that. That's really ambitious. And so how they make that value proposition to consumers is going to be super interesting to me. And honestly, that's what I'm waiting to hear for before I change bank accounts, right?
Yeah, I think I have to have a lot more Bitcoin, I think. So Nate, if you could just like send me a lot of Bitcoin, I think that would probably, that would move the needle for me. Then I'd be like, okay,
69.3 million Bitcoin, Zach?
Yeah, well, that's probably an ether, but you can talk to from the Bitcoin whale, and we could work something out. But the idea that people can get yield on these assets, I think is attractive, right? Like crypto is very much motivated by financial incentives, and if that's an incentive that is in keeping with your sort of philosophical ethos, then it may be something that a lot of people would use going forward as this asset class grows. But I mean, I think Naomi's point is like very spot on, right? Like the thing about crypto is that you can do all this stuff without a new type of bank. But yeah, we'll see where people go.
I think
for
to your point,
everyday person, Nate, what are the risks associated with moving your money over to a crypto bank?
Right. So that's to your point, Naomi, that's important to consider. These lenders do try to talk about themselves in relation to regular financial institutions, but they look a lot more like securities lenders than they do your regular bank. That's because their loans are over collateralized, and sometimes they take that collateral and they rehypothecate it, which is something that comes out of the security lending space, where they would then lend out that collateral to someone else. So it's a more risky business in terms of you don't have the FDIC insurance that you would have at a bank. You don't have the regular bank examinations. Recently, the defunct, bankrupt crypto lender Cred, it was revealed during their bankruptcy hearing. Actually, the examiner found that they had hired a fugitive from the UK. Their former chief capital officer, James Alexander, had broken out of jail, and the firm apparently had not done their due diligence, which is not something that you'd necessarily would see at a bank. There are many people that might argue out of the great financial crisis that many bankers should be in jail, but you rarely see a bank that ends up hiring someone that's just broken out of jail.
Viewers, this is a good example of not doing your research.
Right, exactly. Well, let's change tracks and keep talking about the world of fugitives and hacks and all of this crazy stuff. I want to catch everyone up about what's going on with the Mt. Gox saga. So I might start off just by providing a bit of background. There may be some viewers who actually, they've heard about Mt. Gox. They know it's like a big moment in crypto history. They don't really know what went down. So essentially, I mean, Mt. Gox was the place that you would go to exchange crypto. It was like the only place. There were lots of really small, dodgy places, but then 70% of all traffic went through Mt. Gox. So it was really what everyone was using. And then starting around 2013, withdrawals started to get real slow and it was very difficult. And then 2014, suddenly they started to say, okay, well, we're temporarily halting. Oh, now we're freezing accounts. Or now we're restarting. Oh, halting again. And things just got crazy until finally they announced that they had lost, I think it was 850,000 Bitcoins. They didn't know at the time whether it had been stolen, embezzled. There was lots of talk, chatter around that time with us saying was this Mark Carpella's embezzling this? He was the person running this at the time. So essentially, years and years later, they've gone through all this litigation to figure out what went wrong. And it seems that it all was taken out of this hot wallet starting in 2011. It was a bug with the malleability of the transaction ID that allowed you to redo transactions within Mt. Gox. So they managed to reclaim some of that money, but essentially there's a huge chunk of money that belonged to people who put their money in Mt. Gox that went missing. Now, what do they do with the remaining funds since Mt. Gox decided, they asked Japan, it's based in Japan, they asked them to be liquidated so that they didn't have to be subject to lawsuits at the time. It would halt those proceedings. But with that liquidation comes a whole lot of complication, right? Because some of that money was put in fiat, some of it was in Bitcoin Cash, or Bitcoin, actually it wasn't Bitcoin Cash, but since it would have been Bitcoin Cash because it's since split. But there were lots of different currencies at the time. So how do you repay people? That's what they're figuring out. Now, there's this class action lawsuit against Carpella's, against Mt. Gox going on. And then yesterday we had Carpella's actually respond to that and say, guys, class action lawsuit is not the way we should go. We have this proposal that will basically repay your funds in the method that you deposited it, and it will pay it according to a percentage of whatever you put in. You're going to get more out of it if you do this than a class action lawsuit. And it's a very interesting situation there, especially when you're comparing lawsuits to just going with what they propose. I'm going to throw this to the group. What do you guys think about all of this saga? It's apparently meant to be wrapping up in October, they're aiming for, but this has been a long time coming. Are we finally going to see the end of this ongoing Mt. Gox fiasco? Ben, what are your thoughts here?
I mean, I think in this case, this is again where the crypto world just resembles, the more traditional world. They offer up a settlement and one guy's like, nope, I'm going to keep suing you for a class action lawsuit because I think I can get more money out of it. So that's kind of my reflection. I don't know. We've been sitting with the Mt. Gox situation. It feels like forever. I know it is not literally forever, but again, it's just ongoing. And so this kind of conflict doesn't really give me hope that we're going to see a clean resolution in any sense of the word anytime soon.
It's pretty close to forever in crypto time, in crypto terms, in crypto years, which is pretty interesting. So Naomi, check me on this. So my understanding was that the specific currency repayment was the sticking point for a lot of people, right? That Bitcoin that got locked. Yeah, right. That Bitcoin that got locked up in 2013, that's if I'm going to get paid in dollar terms as to what that was in 2013, I am getting hosed on the value of that Bitcoin. So Wait, did they solve that? Is that the development here? Like that's been worked out?
That's what they're planning on solving. They had this proposal. It was set out, I think it was last year it was laid out, and now people basically have to vote for it. So if you've registered as a creditor to this, then you will have an opportunity to voice your opinion here. There have been interesting things going on with that. Like I remember I did an interview at the time with a friend of mine. Like there are lots of things to consider. People were holding money in Mt. Gox, even though there were like red flag for months and months and months and months, and it was plenty of time to get their money out. So there were some of my friends who were like, this should be bailed out. It's too big to fail. And I'm like, what? That's the opposite of crypto, guys. You had so many months of warning, and it was laziness that led you to not get your money out of this, right? So and then I had other friends who were trying to make money arbitraging because the value of coins on Mt. Gox when they opened back up again was so much less because of the trust issues. So they lost a lot of money keeping stuff in there. But you're right. Like if they were to pay out at like the $400 price point, which is essentially what they said it would have been, then that's not Bitcoin. And Mark Karpelès would have walked away as a billionaire, getting to keep the rest of it. So obviously there have been ongoing negotiations about this. And now it seems that he's saying, well, actually, we'll repay you according to what you put the money in. Because it's also not fair if you put in fiat and then you get paid out in Bitcoin, right? So it's this ongoing saga. We'll see what happens. It's apparently meant to be wrapping up in October, and I will be glad to see the end of it personally. But Zack, take us to close.
All right, we'll wait another day for the Magic the Gathering online exchange resolution, and I'm going to be happy about that. But that was the hash for today. And the cool thing about tomorrow at 9 a.m. is that Beeple, that guy who just sold an NFT for $69.3 million, is going to be talking on First Mover. I'm going to be watching that. Emily, Lawrence, they're going to be asking this guy all sorts of crazy questions. So definitely tune into that tomorrow. I know I'll be watching that for sure. In the meantime, we have All About Bitcoin at 3 p.m. Eastern today. Another fantastic show that you should watch. And we'll be back again tomorrow, so sorry about that. But it'll be cool too. We'll do a recap of the Beeple interview.
Exactly.
All right. Well, that was it for today. I'm Zach. It's Naomi. It's Ben. It's Jen. It's Nate. And we'll see you again soon. Thanks.
Bye.
Have a great day, y'all.
Bye.